Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our second of 5 sessions on the divine feminine as it's refracted through the lives and works of women around the world. As we enter into this discussion today, I want to note something that I've been pondering as a result of our first session yesterday. And that is, we often think of the divine feminine in terms of goddesses like Kuan Yin or Ishtar or Kali or Mary Magdalene or the Mother Mary. And the very notion of divine feminine or the sacred feminine often denotes something that's transcendent, sort of beyond the earthly realm. The point I want to offer today is that that's very true. And the opposite is also equally true, that the divine feminine is the ground that we walk on. It's the earth that we inhabit. And that's why, from time immemorial and virtually in every culture around the world, we refer to Mother Earth, Mother Nature. And of course, the origins of the entire spiritual and religious impulse of humanity came out of the earth goddesses and the telluric energies of the earth. The earth pulsates with feminine energies. And I want to note that in relationship to something that Carl Jung observed as he was contemplating as a Swiss psychiatrist the phenomenon in the 1920s and the 1930s around the upsurge of National Socialism in Germany that culminated, as we all know, in the takeover of the Nazis by the Nazis of the German government that led to the Second World War and the Holocaust. As he pondered this, he offered in the mid 30s the idea of an archetypal possession of the German collective psyche, a possession by the archetype of Wotan. Archetypes are clearly present and important. But as he followed the rise of Hitler and he pondered it more deeply, he came to the conclusion that what had triggered the rise of the god of frenzy, Wotan, in the German psyche that took the German race completely off the cliff was that the German people were probably more urbanized than any other country. And he said they had cut themselves off from nature. And when that happens, he says, we become prey. We live our lives in the air. We have no grounding, and we become prey to any demagogue or madman who tells us he is the answer. And I think that as we ponder our current global predicament, as we consider what we're doing to our earth and the savaging of our planet, while at the same time we're teetering on the brink of thermonuclear war, we've unleashed tariff and trade wars now globally. The foundations of civilization are literally shaking under our feet. But that's our problem. We're grounded in civilization, these human constructs of politics and society and economics and finance and war. And we think that's real. That's what the Germans thought. They had the highest scientific, economic standing of any country in the world. And that led, as Jung observed, to the hubris. And I would posit that that is the root cause of our predicament today. Collectively, we're governed far more by the fluctuations of the stock markets than we are by the cycles of nature. We're triggered far more by what we read on social media than the gleanings we can make of a full moon or a sunset. And this is why each year we go as a university to Chartres, to the hill of Chartres, west of Paris. Because when the Druids came to what is now France, over 3,500 years ago, they sensed the peculiar energy of the feminine. And in fact, they built the entire Celtic Druidic political economy around the sacred hill of Chartres. Such was their reverence for the feminine and the mound and the well and the forest that they found there concentrated in Chartres. So each year, as we'll be doing in July, we return to the sacred waters. We climb the sacred hill. We attune for 7 days and 7 nights with the sacred feminine that you can feel pulsating from the ground under your feet. And as we navigate the turbulence that is escalating all around us, it may be that the most important thing any of us could do is once a day take our shoes off and with our bare feet touch the ground and remember the mother. So thank you everyone for joining us here on Humanity Rising. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And now I would like to turn the program over to my good friend and colleague, Tom Eddington.
Jim, thank you, Jim. Thank you for the warm and beautiful reminder of Mother Nature. And as I shared yesterday in the program, I try and spend each morning in nature and be reminded and connected to that's important to us. And looking forward to another wonderful program. I'd like to invite our panelists into the conversation. And as we did yesterday with Karen Wilhelm Buckley leading us in a guided centering practice, I'd like to invite Joreen and Caroline to kick us off again today with another practice. And just delighted to have my good friend and colleague Shawne Mitchell with us again today, who has helped put this amazing week together. So welcome to you all. And Joreen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Shawne. Thank you, Jim, for a beautiful introduction and bringing in the matter of the mother. I would like to invite us all to really start there, to start with the sensation of our body and our feet touching the ground, not as a practice or something that we do, but as an actual physical connection, a somatic sensing of our feet, of our body, and just start where our feet touch the ground. And then from there, noticing the balance of breath, the balance of breathing in, welcoming air into our bodies, breathing out as a release. Breathing in, letting our bodies be moved by that air, that breath. Breathing out, letting that all go again. Then with the next breath in, just bring in any thoughts, attention, any energy that is not yet in your own body. Bring it into your body by following the line of your spinal cord. Just bringing it in and anchoring yourself in your roots. First energy center, your pelvic area. Just bring all awareness in and down. Anchoring in that still point within us. And then feel if something in your body wants to be let go of. And see if you can do that by allowing your body to naturally move. Maybe rock. Maybe move. Can you tune into movement? Your in-breath and your out-breath. Really centering yourself in your own energy, in your own anchor point, connected to the earth, to your root chakra, which is where we are connected energetically, but also physically to the Mother Earth, the planet that we are home. And then from there, can you allow your intention for this gathering, this community, this meeting of minds, hearts, and souls to come up? Can you connect to your own heart? And then can you connect to the energy of the group? Energetically feeling into every one of us that is present here today, sharing this priority to show up, to connect, to collaborate? Can you feel into the wider field, the movement, the energy of this co-creation and collaboration? And then for a few moments, can you tap into that energy in silence?
As we attune to this silence within us and to the wider field around us, may we find ourselves in community today. May we feel the deep connection we share as humanity. May we give thanks for each of us here today to listen with our open hearts, our open minds, to find ways to inspire us in our own lives and in the lives of all those we touch around us. And we bring our whole selves to listen today to the voice which is within us, as well as the voices without us. And we give deep thanks for this time, for all the people who have worked to bring together this moment in time which we share together today.
Thank you both. Beautiful way to start the program today. Yorian, I'd like to ask if you could share some of your opening thoughts, and then Caroline, I'll have you follow, and Shawne, if there's anything you'd like to add, and then we'll get into a dialogue about our program today, which is Balancing the Divine.
Yes, thank you, Tom. I must say, when I got approached by Shawne for being here with you today, I was both very grateful and honored, as well as activated. So holding those energies at the same time, because the topic of feminine leadership, the divine feminine, and the balance that she is here to bring is not only so dear to my heart, but is something that is calling me forth to keep doing the work I do. And that is because I feel that there is both a need and an openness in the field, receptivity, an invitation, an active invitation from the systems that we are currently working with, to acknowledge that there is something that we need to invite that is bigger than what we've been currently and previously working with. And I also want to speak to the fact that for me, working with mostly masculine leaders in mostly masculine energy fields, in corporate businesses, for example, it's been a search, a journey to find what that is and what it is that we're invited to bring to that table, so to say. Because initially, the conversation, I feel, has been more about, can we balance men with women, right? Can we balance male leaders with female leaders? Can we balance outward performance and success with more soft skills, and bringing that into a realm of still, we need to go from A to B. So as a linear approach to we are now somewhere, we're not happy with it, so we need to go somewhere else. Whereas for me, it now really feels like, can we bring in a complementary energy to set us up for success in a way that we say yes to all of it? So where we come from a place of either this or that, we need to let go of A, we need to go to B, like an or type of conversation. The value I feel that the divine feminine and that in female energy that we're here, feminine energy we're here to bring, is around holding space for all of it. So can we get into the and say yes to all of it, including the systems that probably most of us on the call right now aren't happy with, just to say it like this, and that we're fighting for, or we're aiming for improvement. We want to balance it out with divine feminine energy. And what I feel in my practice, working with these leaders, when they open up to the possibility or to the energy of divine feminine in their work, it just becomes a field of where more is possible. And what I love, what Jim is sharing with us around the actual physical form of the feminine, is what I feel is that we could get back into not just the concept of what we think it should mean, or the theory or the mind images that we have of it, but really, where do we meet the divine feminine energy? Where do we bring it into form? Where do we bring it into matter? Where do we bring it into her place at the table, and what should that look like? And to also really inviting to bring it into the physical realm of where people meet, where decisions are made, where money, investment, time, and energy is being redirected into a place where it benefits all of life. And I feel that's probably the last thing I want to say about it, is that the divine energy back in the room for me is about the knowing, the deep knowing that all life is sacred, and that we are here to steward it, to facilitate that, and to really prepare a space for that work.
Caroline, thank you, Shawne. Caroline.
You know, it's an interesting thing, because I work very much in the practical world, having to live in a very male-dominated business world, dealing all the time mostly with men, and but working with women as well, especially because I work with herbs that come from all over the world, and it is usually women who are out there doing most of the harvesting and the collecting. And it's an extraordinary thing, really, to be constantly trying to hold these energies in balance within myself as well as without of myself, to be able to act on, or let me say, rephrase it, to be able to receive the kinds of feminine knowledge that comes from intuition, that comes from dreams, that comes from signals you get from the universe, whatever that might be, and then act on them in a way that still honors the female, but it has enough of that male energy that you do act. So it's one of those things where I'm constantly looking within myself for balancing my own male-female selves, and bringing them into harmony. And at the same time, as I look out in the world, oh my God, the masculine seems so out of balance right now. Where's the divine feminine rising up, right, to counterbalance that force that is war at this point, whether it's a trade war or whether it's a physical war like in the Ukraine and in Gaza. So we seem to be at this moment of extreme crisis, and yet it's also in the microcosm of each of our lives. And that's, I think, what's so important, is to look at the macrocosm, look out there, see what's going on, but then also be able to bring it inside and look at our own life and how are we dealing with these same forces that I struggle with daily, even to the extent that I now have in my business, which is 30 years old, I've brought in this year a co-CEO, a very strong alpha male, wonderful human being, but so alpha male and so action-oriented. And I have all these values I've built up as that female founder and creator of a product and of a business, and really working with that energy, allowing it to push me when I need to be pushed, and saying no when it's very clear it's a no. And I think that's the inner challenge for each one of us. How do we know when it's time to listen, to receive, and then to act, or not to act? How do we take those signals from within, from the universe, from without, and really try and make sense of them and find our way through this? And I am a very strong believer in grounding in nature, without a doubt. And when I haven't been in nature enough, I know that I get imbalanced, right? So whether it's putting our feet in the ground, as Jim suggested earlier, whether it's just making a beautiful bouquet of flowers, going to our farmer's market and getting our fresh vegetables, whatever it is, when we can feel into our Mother Earth, our Gaia, and yet also acknowledge the father principle, right? That male creation principle goes along with the female creation principle. Anyway, I want to just bring out that each of us, I know, has this struggle in their lives to stay in balance. And for us each to look, what does it take? How do I give myself enough? I'm always looking at, how do I give myself, my inner self, enough time to balance that, all the demands that come from my outer self that say, I have to get this done, and this done, and this done, right? So I don't know if anybody else relates to this, but I think that is the challenge of our time, also to deal with that, to find the ways that we connect as humans together, because we are so now connected through our phones. I know that in my company, I see people in our break room, they used to talk to each other. Now they're all on their phones while they're having their break, not talking to each other. So how do we make sure that we really do connect like we are doing here today, talking to each other, listening to each other, and then finding our voice to stand up together like we did last weekend with Hands Off. So we stand up together and we give a response to the out of control male in our society today.
I just want to pick up on a point I heard from both of you speak in different ways and tease it out. And I'll pose it as a question. Is it that there are situations, settings where the divine feminine isn't present at all and it needs to be brought in? Or that it is present, but it just needs to be amplified or recognized and acknowledged and strengthened?
I can tell a little story that I think many of us probably witnessed this, but I would say that the divine feminine is having a hard time being heard at this moment in time. And when I saw the Reverend Marianne, I think her last name is pronounced Bude, talk to Trump and Vance at the National Cathedral during the inauguration, she spoke from that incredible divine feminine point of view, and she radiated light and love. And what it ran up against were closed hearts. I think when you have closed hearts like that, it's very hard for that masculine to receive. And so I think a challenge of our time now is, how do we find a way to open those hearts again, that they can feel the suffering that they cause? And I don't know the answer, Tom, but I think we're working it out as a human race together.
Wow. Yeah, that was a beautiful story, and it brings me right back to seeing that on my screen, and just in my inner divine feminine, just immediately recognizing the power of that moment. And I think we recognize that, all of us. I also believe that again, bridging back to Jim's point earlier, that the divine feminine is everywhere, is in any physical form. Like it's Shakti energy, it's a physical form of life, it's life force energy. It's just that we have forgotten to recognize it in any living being, and also in every human being. And so she's there, but she's not being recognized. She's not being given a voice. She's not. And when she is there, and she knows, like when there's women in rooms, in spaces where there is that understanding or that calling, I must say, into this is where I have to say no, I have to draw a line, I have to start like bringing this voice, this energy into the table, then often it feels unsafe and uninvited, and therefore it is not even recognized as divine feminine, but as obnoxious feminine, or as like too bold feminine, or too whatever feminine. So I think it's very crucial that we start bringing in the divine feminine in a form and in a role and in a manner that she's being invited by whoever is setting this space, by whoever is calling this space, but also in women, in between ourselves. I feel that the very essence of that divine feminine is often misunderstood. I often say it's like spiritual marketing has taken its own turn, right? When there is, in Europe, we always say it's like women in flowy dresses going to Ibiza, and then all of a sudden it's like that's where she is, right? But that's just such a tiny aspect of a certain softness, which I feel we are to bring back into the room as well, of a certain lightness that we are to bring back. Only she's so much more than just that aspect. And so, yeah, I think she's ever present. And also, well, how do we start to even recognize her in all the interactions that we have?
I'd like to pick up on a comment that Caroline made, but before that, Shawne, I'd like to have you weigh in on
Thank
question.
you. Thank you, Tom. I want to piggyback on Yoreen here. And I pulled something off of LinkedIn that Yoreen wrote. And this is Yoreen, and then I'm going to speak to this. Let's stop celebrating feminine leadership when it still means proving women's right to be in the boardrooms, negotiating with men, and claiming space. Instead of building something new, it's time for something wilder, something older, something we are barely beginning to remember. The high priestesses, the wisdom keepers, the seercesses and oracles, the feminine power that led and guided civilizations, not through dominance, but through devotion. And I feel, thank you, Yoreen, I unquote there. I feel for myself, and I see it, for instance, with what Carolyn was sharing with the story, is that although Sister Mary was radiating light, and coming up against not being heard, if you will, I would hope to feel that on some level, she was probably heard in a bigger quantum entanglement field, if you will. And if the guys there, they may have, but they had to shut it down, because to open their hearts for them is all about fear and weakness and showing vulnerability. So another one of my takes with this then is melding the being with the doing. And when we're triggered, what are our practices that we utilize rather than going into a default response that gives us that little bit of space and air to align with, let's source divine, universal wisdom to inform what our decision or our response is going to be. And as a woman, it's going to sort of maybe come out fairly feminine, or, it's going to be the being, as opposed to whether it comes out looking masculine or looking feminine. I've not had much of this challenge in my life. I've mentioned I have 5 brothers, and I was raised around men, and I've not, often felt that it was uncomfortable. I really encourage, I guess the way I would look at it and bringing it full circle to what we're saying is, what are our practices to align ourselves when we need to be informed from source that is non-dual, and let that be what our response is. And in that, I feel too, there comes that, and Tom and I've had this conversation, there's this instant yes, there's this instant deep knowing that the response is, this is the response from deep knowing.
Yeah, thank you, Shawne. Caroline, I want to go back to a comment you made when you referenced the incident at the National Cathedral during the inauguration. I watched that. I don't know that I watched it live, but I found myself watching it over and over and over again to see each of the interactions. And the first person to react was J.D. Vance. He immediately turned to his wife, and they had some kind of brief exchange. And then at some point, it looked like President Trump was awakened from a slumber and had his own visceral reaction to it. But I had the same reaction you had, that these were two men that their hearts were completely closed. They were completely detached from their heart. And over the prior months during the campaign, the rhetoric, the cruelty, the things that they were saying, that they believed that they were going to do upon the election, or as a result of the election upon inauguration, was representative of an individual whose heart is closed, that has no access to their divine feminine, male or female. And so I'm curious for the three of you, what are you doing in your work? What are you doing in your daily practices? What are you doing for the men and the women in your life to help them ensure that they have access to their hearts, that they have connection to their humanity, that they have connection to their divinity, that we all have, whether we have access to it or awareness or not. And I'm really curious to hear from each of you. What are the things that you're doing in your personal life, but what are you doing professionally to help those you work with?
Well, I'll respond, I guess, Tom. I have about 50 employees. Not all of them speak English, and I'm not that great at Spanish. But I think the important thing always is to connect as a human, not as a boss, or as an employer or whatever it is, but as a human, to listen. You can listen to energy and notice when somebody needs to be, have some personal time or spoken to. In all of those ways, I hope, and I think the evidence is there because I have employees who come to me with very personal problems and stories and whatnot, that I am attentive and able to help in any way I can. At the same time, I've also had to learn that Ticino is a place of business, and we have work we have to accomplish. And you can nurture people and you can meet them with that open heart. But at the same time, at a certain point, you also have to say, you need to perform. And that's that trying to find the balance, because everybody has drama in their lives. We all do. And so find the balance of allowing for the human aspect to take place. And at the same time, run a business where things have to get accomplished is really, really something, Tom. But I do my very best to be present and to I heard you all yesterday talk about creating a climate of safety. So creating that climate of safety where people are safe to bring forth what they need to, or what they're thinking, or their creative ideas, or anything like that. and at the same time, not make it too safe that people just sort of sit back and think, oh, what a great place this is. I'll just hang out all day. So, it's a very fine balance. But Tom, that's one that I work with. And I hope that addresses some of what you were wondering.
Thank you. Yoreen?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. And I've actually, it also kind of takes me back to the moment I remember I was in my burnout. I had a 2-year burnout 6 years ago, and I was just on the verge of getting therapy. And then my therapist said, I have something for you. It's cool. It's a mindfulness. It's like a mindfulness, open-hearted mindfulness practice. And I remember she's like, I have a sample for you. So just listen to it and then feel if this is something for you. And I was still coming out of I'd worked for Shell for 12 years, a big energy company. And I was still kind of in that like performance, masculine energy frame of having to achieve. And so then she sent me this meditation from the teacher, and it was so soft. It was all about open-hearted. And I remember her voice going, then you touch into, make connection to your heart. And my whole system was like, no, I can't listen to this. Like, it's this. And so I ended up, I know that this is where I have to go. And so this for me was a breakthrough moment. And the point I want to make there is that in my practice, I now closely work as a space holder with people, with leaders, with men. Somehow, most of my clients come to me because of their, like, I feel like my heart's not open. And I've kind of withdrawn my energy into my like almost into my body, so that my heart doesn't get to play, because I'm protecting myself. And so, and what comes out is the clinician, right? Is the disattached, rude, cruel, almost like the things people can say in their energy. You're like, you can't be saying this. But then holding space for that in compassion, and really holding the field of what in the life of this person, in this life or any life, just that frame has dramatically helped me in saying, it doesn't matter how much shit you throw at me. Like, I don't mean any, but like when I tell them that, literally, I will stay here. I don't care how much rudeness or whatever comes out, because in the end it's hurt, it's pain. And so just bring it into the space, and we will just be with it. And that safe, like coming back to the place of safety, which I think, Carolyn, you're also talking about, like that space of unconditional love, which usually these people haven't been familiar with, is and it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of patience. But just staying there, being with them, and just saying, okay, what else is there? And what else is there? And what else is there? Being the physical space holder, just in that container of feminine energy, and also being a representative. Sometimes for me is the archetype of that feminine embodied safe space, just helps them melt down the walls, break down part by part, so that there is a little bit of light coming back into that system. And then once we are there, then it becomes a practice of connecting to it, the meditations, the visualizations, etc. But it really needs space holding for it to be able to feel like it's safe for me to be able to connect to my heart in the first place.
Thank you. Shawne?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I relate to some of what both Caroline and Yoreen said. Caroline, I'm not in a scenario right now where I have people working for me and, they need to perform. And so there is time in the coaching where, like Yoreen, there's time for deep listening, and to be that non-judgmental, safe place, that vessel, if you will, for people to share, for them to share and to share. And as Shawne does not talk, there's so much spoken in the silence, then that person feel safer, like, well, like men are deep wells. And usually when women start talking, they stop talking. And it's only when we stop talking, I hate to categorize, but when women stop talking that you can, throw the bucket down into the deep well, because he's beginning to feel like he's safe and he can say more along the lines of what Yoreen was saying, and say more and then say more. And I don't want to skip saying something about trauma, because there's such a spectrum to trauma. And there's so many now conscious leaders, and some in the guild that Tom and I are in, that their specialty is trauma. Not only trauma for coaching the leader who leads an organization who's experienced, say, severe trauma in their lives, but also how does the leader help their employees who are perhaps experiencing trauma in their lives and in their homes. And that's I'm going to call that a superpower, sort of a super skill. And I have to feel, again, it comes back to presence and that deep listening and being a safe place for people to share. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you all. I'd like to pick up on something you just said, Shawne, that men are deep wells, and I'll just speak as a male. My lived experience, and I see it in other men as well, is that as human beings, we all have needs, and oftentimes we reflect our needs through our emotions, or emotions are a reflection of our expressed, met, and unmet needs. And at least here in the US, and for those of us, myself, having grown up in the upper Midwest, there's a cultural reluctance for men to express their emotion. And it's a function of not being connected to our needs. And as a result, for many men, where it's not okay to be connected to your needs, therefore you don't express, therefore you come off, as I suspect, and are received as a deep well. And I don't know that men's wells are any deeper than women's, but the access to it is much harder. And I don't know how that lands for the three of you. I guess that's my reflection, or my reaction to what you shared, Shawne, and I appreciate the reflection.
I would agree with you. I don't feel that men's wells are any deeper than women's wells, but my experience, I should say, is that women have more access, and let's say she's on a date or in a meeting or whatever, and then one-on-one, and she will generally, if she feels safe, she'll do all the talking pretty much. And if she asks him a question, if she doesn't interrupt him, he will speak, and then he might, and if she doesn't respond, or he might go deeper, and then again go deeper, and then again go deeper, depending on how she is holding the space. That's been my experience.
I wonder if men don't need to listen to each other even more. I think so often it's easier for men to talk to women and share with women and open up about their feelings with women, but with each other, that's tougher, I think. And that's why I think the men's movement, has been really great. I don't know how, I'm not as in touch with how active it is now as I was a few decades ago, when the men's movement was, so alive and well, and there were all sorts of groups being convened of, and you probably were part of some of them, Tom, I would imagine. But where do we now provide space for our men to come together, not in sports and competition, but in a place where they listen to each other? And I'm the mother of 3 sons. I have 6 grandsons. They're not all mine. Some of these I inherited, right? I have 2 stepsons. I'm surrounded by men and boys. And it's really important to me to realize that they need each other to be able to be present for each other. Both or 2 of my 3 sons actually did at the point of graduating from high school, they did retreats in the wilderness. They did solo retreats for 3 or 4 days alone in the wilderness as part of a group of vision questing. Most powerful experiences. Both of them, one is now in his 40s, the other in his 30s, carry that with them as one of the most important things they've done in their lives. I think it's if we can learn to provide space like that, men to be with men, boys to be with boys, men to be mentor boys, etc. And not just we women to do the talking about the emotions, right? But try and draw that into their lives as well. Anyway, it's a little point of view from my mothering.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, Carolyn, because, and also Shawne, I think, Tom, what you were saying, like, I'm part of a movement called Awake Origins, where actually the majority, so I do a lot of trainings, leadership trainings, and in most of the spaces in personal development, at least where I am being facilitating, when it's like a free subscription and people just join individually, it's women. Right, there's something about like the majority of this of the work in this field, or the trainings being followed, etc., is done by women. But if there is men leading it, somehow the majority of which is in the Awake Origins movement, for example, where I'm a facilitator, the men come. So I suddenly find myself in a group of 20 where there's only 5 or 3 women, and then it shifts. Because then suddenly, if one of them, if there's something around men sharing, even if it's just from my experience, right? I mean, I'm just a facilitator, but if there's just this one tiny sparkle, if you like, of emotion, of true like feeling being shared, then the purity and the amplification of that in the group is unmatched to any of what I've seen with women. And so there's something really beautiful when you talk about balancing, is around the more sacred spaces there are for men, for boys to really show and to have role models and to just agree with each other that this is how we heal, this is our way. There was actually one group where I was in a leadership training with 13 men and my co-facilitator, which was also a man. So I was and it was a blessing for me to be able to just step one step back, and as a woman being the space holder for men joining in and just being there, and how they would heal with each other. I think it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever seen, because it went so quickly. Once the agreement was that this is where we're sharing, this is our normal here, and so this is what we do. And then the ripple effect of that for their sons, for their daughters, for their spouses, for their parents, for their the companies they were leading was just, it was magical.
Thank you, Yoreen. I can't help but wonder from what you've said is how can we, as men and women, but how can we extrapolate that, the essence of what you were experiencing, and utilize that in a sense as an opening, where right now there's so much discontent in the world with the chaos in the world. Is that, a moment? Are we having an opening here of what is happening geopolitically? I'm wondering, what do you think about that, Caroline or Tom or Yoreen?
I was waiting for my turn, but then
Go ahead.
I feel a yes, so I'm just going to skip the line. Yes, and I believe that, and I'm also I also need, so this is me partially needing this to be a portal, because otherwise, I mean, there's something in me that wants to make sense and then put meaning to what we're experiencing in the world. So this might just be wishful thinking, but then let it be wishful thinking. But to really perceive it as a portal because of so many, because what we are witnessing, I feel, is the extreme of toxic, not just masculinity, toxic masculinity. And so that extreme in the conversations I have with people is making not just these people move, because they were already moving on the other end of the spectrum, whether it's women, whether it's men, whether it's, but these people go and say, wait a second, but no, this we cannot do. And so there is so much moved and responding in our, I think, collective field of what normal is and how we want to treat ourselves as human beings, that it brings a new conversation. And so that brings a new voice to the table, one that is speaking up, and that brings emotion to the table of what it really matters, because it's values, it's core values of humanity that's being at stake here. And so I feel that there is a portal where people start to actually open up. And if we can create, as facilitators, as leadership trainers, as coaches, facilitate spaces where we invite people to just speak up from what they feel this means to them, that is just that is like the breaking of an old pattern of not saying anything because we're okay. I think everyone can agree that we're not okay anymore. And so and so we can move away from, yeah, we're fine. No, we're not fine anymore. And so therefore something is touched, and it's, in this case, probably pain that is being shared. But if we can share that openly in a safe space, then that is going to make it more normal, I feel, for people, for men maybe in particular, but also women in a more masculine role in that same space of how do we do things as a business leadership team or whatever, so that we can start to bring in the full human in the room. And sometimes that's really all we need to do.
Yeah, thank you. There's that expression, break down before breakthrough, right? And, I was listening to a podcast that Bernie Sanders was, I guess, a couple of days ago, and I was reflecting on all the protests on Saturday here in the United States. And I feel like it's exactly what you're talking about. People are coming together. People that aren't over here or totally over there. The ones in the middle are like, wait a minute. And so I feel like what you're saying, there's a new opening. And other than coming together and having the conversations and having the voices being heard, not just now that we're seeing what this opening looks like, but how's Shawne, I should just say, going to be informed or by source as to what her being should be doing in support of this opening? Caroline?
I think that, look, maybe it's hopeful thinking, but I really do see evidence of it, that this time is about awakening. And many people have been deep in their whatever. But this rise of power through the use of fear, I believe, is going to eventually awaken everybody to their groundedness, that of what there isn't to fear. People are so afraid of so many things, right? And some people are afraid even to go into crowds anymore because they're going to get sick from this or that because we're breathing the same air, this kind of thing. I think this fear crisis, which Trump has brought forth, has to come out from within us. And when it does, hopefully, there is going to be let's say, a renewal or a rebirth of our connections as humanity, and our reliance on each other, and our ways that we recognize that we are all dependent upon not only each other, but also our planet Earth and all the gifts that she gives us. So I always take this very positive point of view, Shawne, looking towards, okay, really looks terrible right now, but can it be possible that in fact it's going to bring us to a place of a new understanding as this culture called humanity all around the world, and a new way of feeling our interconnectedness? That's what I hope.
Yeah, I think what's there for me, Shawne, in your question, and I'll share a personal experience I had. I had a 22-year, very, very successful business career. I had become a partner in one of the globe's most respected management consulting firms, by every external perspective. I had arrived. I was living an extraordinary life, and then I got profoundly ill and had been bedridden for about 3 years when I went off on a 1-week retreat with a variety of practitioners. There was a Tibetan Rinpoche. There were about a dozen shaman. There was one of the foremost authorities on prenatal and perinatal psychology. A lot of different practitioners, a lot of different practices. And in one of the evenings, the shaman had come together to take us on a journey. And I was lying on the ground. My eyes were closed. One of the shaman was instructing us on the journey. The others were beating their drums, and I ventured down into the earth. I traveled this long corridor under the earth, and I was being guided by, all I could see was from an elbow up, a hand holding a lantern in the dark. And I went down this corridor and suddenly had been transformed into the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, and I was given my heart. And then the drummers started drumming, calling me back. And when I arrived back into out of the journey, I was lying on the ground. I had this excruciating pain in my chest. And it felt like a big mound on my chest where someone had physically opened up my rib cage and inserted my heart. And it was incredibly painful. And the two shaman I was working with looked at me and said, "What happened to you?" I visibly was a different person than I had been 15 or 20 minutes before the journey. And it was in that experience that I realized I had been, for most of my adult life, had no connection with my heart. And it set me off on a different trajectory of my life. And I don't believe I was any different than most of my colleagues I was working with, at least the male colleagues I was working with. There was no sense of connection. There was no safety. There was no appropriate way of showing up with our hearts as men in the physical workplace, in our relationships with each other. And I had 2 young children. I had a wife, but there was a separation between how I was showing up at work and how I was showing up outside of work. And so that was coming up for me as you were prompting that question, Shawne. I think the other piece that's there for me is, and I think many of our viewers have heard me say this before, that as a species, humanity, we're acting as though and I think we are, in terms of our consciousness, we're adolescents. And we've gotten ourselves in profound trouble. And we're looking for an adult to step in and just to tell us what to do. And so for the last 20 years, we've seen the election of far-right, authoritarian, masculine, toxic male leaders being put into positions to dictate and tell us what to do. And as a species, we've been extracting from Mother Earth and from each other and all of our relationships to a point where it has to stop. And we need to evolve and move from an extractive to a generative frame, and to move into a space of creativity. And for me, that's the invitation for all of humanity, but especially for the divine feminine, where there's more access for many women to access their intuitive skills, to have a freer access to their creativity. And I'm just inviting and wondering what the three of you think of that perspective of where we are as a species right now.
Well, I would say we all agree with what you're saying, Tom, no question. But to me, again, well, what can we do? And I had a conversation earlier with Caroline about how, and Caroline, I'm going to invite you to speak to this, about, for the most part, a lot of us have been, and I don't want to say acting in sort of silos of, and we, this organization and this group and that organization and that group and so on and so on. And it's really maybe time, well, not maybe, it is time for us to come together in greater community than all these different ones. And sometimes I think they even feel like they're competing with each other. And of course, depending on what the needs are, maybe they are. But in any event, I want to invite you, Caroline, to speak to that, maybe as something that we can look at in terms of a response to the species being so divisive and separate.
Oh my, I wish I had some great words of wisdom to impart on that one.
Me too.
This opening of the heart, this is what's key. This is what we're talking about. We really are meant to be pure love and able to live in a frequency of pure love. That's where we're supposed to be at all times. I challenge myself constantly. Am I coming in from love, or am I, in judgment, or whatever it is? Even on Trump, I've been trying to send him love. I mean, I'm not telling you I'm successful, but I am making that effort to, if you listen to the news and you immediately not react so much, and come from a place where I can just stay open as opposed to shutting down, because the reaction and the judgment is about shutting down, right? Staying in a place of love, staying in a place of trying to listen, but looking for transformation. How do I transform what is happening here into a higher vibration? I think that's what we have to answer, and we have to answer it, all of us collectively. In the march last weekend, the chanting and all of that and the banging on things, at least we were as a group. Everybody was very happy. Of course, it was sunny here in California. Everyone was very happy, though, moving along and taking action, right? Feeling like they could do something with all of the frustration, the fear, and the, upset and all of that. I think that is a combination of all these things, Shawne. We have to look at ourselves. Can we stay in a vibration of love? How can we promote more love on the planet? How can we relieve suffering? Right? That's the Bodhisattva vow. How can we stay here for each other and relieve suffering? And what do we do standing up to people who are promoting suffering, right? And somehow meet them with the open heart. And again, I go back to, the beauty we were all struck by. The Reverend Bude, she spoke with such light pouring through her, such love. Can we meet these people whose hearts are closed and continue to beam that at them from our hearts? That's the only answer I have.
Yeah, what came to mind, it's beautiful. My whole system is like resonating with everything you were saying. And one of the insights I got a few years ago was around the concept of Aini, of the Andean principle of reciprocity, right? And so at first I recognized it just as a you don't take more from the earth than you give back, right? So it's a very transactional way. And when I work with clients or systems just only that idea of like, can we go back to also on a micro level, like what do I take and then what is value? Do I recreate something? Do I regenerate something that can give value back? So that idea of balancing what I take and what I give back. And then not so long ago, I realized that actually it works on another level, which is around, can I share my gifts? Can I share my talents? Can I share my experience? Can I share my voice and share it out because it's been given to me as a gift? And so just that idea of constantly believing that everything I put in and I share and I give is going to do something there, it's going to create value, which is leading from the heart, right? I mean, that's where values and compassion sit. And so that's just been such a eye-opening idea. And I came to that because it's almost like we're being forced to go back to the micro level of what do I take and what do I give? Like if I am the baker and I bake bread, and then there's the carpenter next to me, and then can we trade my bread to him making me a table? And can we just on a very local, we're almost forced to again start producing our own vegetables, right? Of making more local, smaller communities of what do I really need, and where can I find my neighbor? Where can I find my neighbor, my sisters, my brothers, in collectively providing for a community? And that's just been, it's almost like we're being invited, almost forced into going really back into what do I need to sustain life, and what of my life and my gifts can I give to my community? And then, and maybe this is naive, and maybe this is hopeful wishful thinking, but then how much of the big wars of whatever going on outside, when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to the whole economic system, do I really need to be a part of? If I start looking at what of me, what of my gifts and talents can I share with my community, and what of what other people are making can I buy, can I trade, so that we create a system of balance on a micro level, as opposed to being I don't know, like in the chaos of global dynamics that honestly I sometimes just fail to even understand, let alone have insights into what I should be doing with it.
Mm.
And maybe picking up on that point and tying it back to Caroline's comment, I would not only in terms of what are we producing in the world, but I would just take it down to a human level. Brothers David Steindl-Rast talks about gratitude, and he spent most of his 90 plus years of life speaking to gratitude. And as part of my healing process, I received an email note from somebody, and I was so moved by their comments, their gratitude expressed to me, that I created a gratitude folder for myself. And every time I receive an email from somebody, and for 20 years now, it goes into my gratitude folder. And periodically, when I need a sense of reinvigoration of my heart, connection to humanity, connection to others, I'll go back and I'll start reading some of those email notes that came in of expressions of gratitude that someone shared with me. And I can't get through the notes. I'm in tears within a half dozen of the notes. And so, each of us are hardwired to express gratitude. Each of us are hardwired for love, for connection, for compassion. And it comes without any cost. It comes without any price to acknowledge our compassion, our connection, our gratitude, our love for others. Not to take away anything from what you were saying, Joreen, about what can I physically do to contribute as well, but just that human connection feeds our soul.
Yeah, and I believe it's lovely, because I believe it's almost like also the physical, like what can I do is a metaphor for, what can I bring? What in me can I share so that it multiplies? And so love and gratitude, if we could just start there, then we have a lot of things solved, I think, very soon.
I had an experience once where I was told that we humans are unique gratitude generators for the planet. That our role here is actually to generate gratitude. And I love that idea because I feel like I receive love, or I tune into love, or I feel love, or all those things. But the generation of gratitude is something that's like really, I don't know. Anyway, it was a big revelation for me. I hope you guys like the metaphor also. Yeah. So I'm with you, Tom, on those gratitude things that come in when, look, being a businesswoman isn't easy. I got to tell you. And when somebody comes to me and they say, your product changed my life or saved my life or did something, it's such a high, it keeps you going through all the, oh God, why am I still doing this kind of moments? It really is. So gratitude is a big currency in my world.
Yeah, if I
I'm
take it to
drawn. Sorry, Tom, I really want to share this. I'm drawn to share a story with you too, because I think it's so great. Many years ago, when I was working at La Casa de Maria, we had Joan Borisenko come and do a conference retreat with us. And she shared her gratitude practice. And I think this is so awesome. Every day, she thinks of something to be grateful about. It can never be repeated, which means for her that through her day, she's mindful of something new to be grateful for, which in a sense puts her in a state of awareness, let's say, gratitude awareness. And I just thought that was such a great practice. I did want to share that because I thought it was fun.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up and echo something that Caroline shared. I've been spending a lot of time just in inquiry around as Jim and I are preparing for the State of the World Forum in December, and just thinking about the human species has been around for 240,000 years, give or take, and what have we contributed? What have we done as a species for the planet, for the cosmos? And if you start from a belief, which is mine, that the energy of the universe is love, then what have we done as a species? We have liberated 300 gigatons of CO2 from the Earth into the atmosphere, causing all kinds of climate disaster. We have killed millions and millions of human beings and species. We've got 1 million species on the endangered species list because of our species. And on the positive side of the ledger, we have generated an extraordinary amount of love for the cosmos. I'm not sure as a species we've done anything other than that on a meta level, on a cosmic level, but that contribution of love feels like a pretty important contribution to the cosmos.
Tom, and just especially when given intentionally, right? So I was raised in a Christian family, and just every time we had food on the table, we said thanks. And in my adolescence and when I was a teenager, I didn't want to have anything of it anymore. But and then through my spiritual practice, at some point I realized, wait a second, I was raised and one with gratitude as like one of the key principles of my childhood. And that just really touched me. And so the intention of giving gratitude, when we take something, when we take anything out of the earth, or then just replacing it with gratitude and thanks, in energy, I believe would make such a major shift of acknowledging, like, I'm taking something, and then in gratitude, in that energy, I am giving back. to just acknowledge the wealth and the abundance of what we're here also to use. That's beautiful.
And I can't help but wonder if the notion and the idea of gratitude emerging as it has here in our conversation has something to do with the healing that we're looking for, the healing that we can embrace that's going to somehow, yeah, I see Connie's putting in the chat, you know, is gratitude the healing balm? Is that part of our job now to somehow contribute to the chaos? Just wondering, because I noticed how it emerged here.
Something I was grateful just last night for. Again, trying not to be reactive and judgmental. When the Supreme Court came out and, you know, ruled against bringing back that poor guy, along with all the other poor men that are stuck in El Salvador, I was grateful that 4 women stood up together. Right? Amy, who came in as a, you know, I mean, almost an illegal choice for the Supreme Court, from my point of view, at the last minute, right? Was put in and has, you know, a lot of beliefs I don't believe in. Nevertheless, she's moved and stood with the 3 other liberal justices and said, this is wrong. So I think what we have to do is look for these moments and points of gratitude that we can find, and these points of places where our love can expand and where our judgment can be suspended, and be there as much as we can. Yeah. You know, COVID showed us all how connected we are all over the world and how quickly something can move and infect everyone, right? And now trade wars are showing us, I mean, Jorian, I love the idea of just eating from my farmer's market, but my business takes herbs from all over the world and puts them into people's cups. And we're in chaos right now because of these tariffs, right? Do you raise prices right away? Do you not? Do you wait? I mean, these businesses all over like mine are going through these terrible decisions at this moment. But what we notice, and what everybody has to notice, is how interdependent we are, right? So even if it hasn't hit the average person yet, it will hit them soon. It will hit their pocketbook. It will hit them as they go to buy whatever it is they want to buy, and they notice that they either can't get it at all, or it's going to cost them a lot more. So it's going to be a way where we awaken to how interconnected we are. And that interconnected is like, it's not a, you know, the genie that can be put back in the bottle and we can say, oh, now we're all going to live in our own little tiny world and survive just independently, you know, in our local space. No, we are a global community. We've seen planet Earth from out of space. We know what our planet looks like, and we know we all inhabit it, and we are all one humanity. And thus, we are being given these times to awaken to how interconnected we are.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. And then resonating on your point, the beauty of then being able to utilize that interconnection with gratitude, with an energy of, you know, collective good, if you like, and just really making a conscious choice as to now that we are here, what do we do with that interconnectivity? How can we bring in the healing powers of gratitude? How can we bring in our collaboration, our, you know, our beliefs of love and of doing good? And then I actually love I was looking up your product, and just the idea of the herbs and the language of the herbs and the healing powers of plants, and just being able to just spread that over the world is, I mean, it's these times that allow us to do just that. So can we spread the medicine that you are here to bring, and so many others, over the world, and use the interconnectivity to really bring that as a new movement.
And as humans, do we understand our dependence on plants? Do we understand that? Our dependence on water, on clean water, on air we can breathe, and on wilderness. So I think all these things we're going to awaken to as we and we're having these shock waves. But okay, this is my positive side again. But I think it's because we're coming into a new paradigm.
Yes.
And that paradigm just is taking some real roller coaster bumps to get us there.
Agreed. Thanks, Caroline.
Well,
What a great morning, I say from the West Coast, but what a great hour and a half. I'm going to turn this over to Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to invite each of you to share any closing comments as we wrap up the show today. Caroline, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think I said what I needed to say, right? Look, I in the spirit of gratitude, I give thanks for everybody who's joined us here today, for everybody who's chatted and shared their points of view. I wish we could hear everyone's voice at this moment, but we need to stand with a united voice. So that standing up and joining and connecting, whether it's in your own home with your own family around the dinner table, or whether it's with your greater community where you are locally, or through these wonderful organizations that are bringing us together, like Ubiquity. Participate, get involved, participate, and then bring it back into your lives. That's what we're all called to do now.
Thank you. Yoreen?
Yeah, just the word participate, because there's something around knowing and just, believing that we need a new balance, and that there's paradigm shifts, and that we all feel that it's happening. Only how do I bring it? And this is what I'm so passionate about. How do I bring? I love what you were saying, Shawne, about how do I get my being to do the doing. I totally misquoted you on that, but it's like the now what and the so what of knowing that there is a shift happening. And for me, that's really about, and I think that's whether it's like, how do I spend my time? What choices do I make in a very small way every day, of like, where do I put my time? Where do I put my energy? Where do I put my money? So that it becomes, back to Jim's point about like the matter, right? So the mother is the matter, it's the material. So we can bring it into form, and we can bring it by our choices, by our actions. We can bring it to life in any conversation where we meet different people, or we spend money on beautiful products, so that it becomes a way of living as opposed to a concept. And that balance is not like a stability point, but it's an act of balancing. It's a constant movement and refinement of sensing what is needed and what in me is responding here. And so what is this moment asking of me to do? And that's in the smaller things, and that's in the bigger things, depending on where you are, what your context is.
Yeah, thank you. Shawne?
I guess I'd lastly share that I want to acknowledge the energy in the room, so to speak, and how amazing it is that just a few short years ago, we would never have contemplated the technology of Zoom to be bringing people from all over the world together, and how intimate it can be, right? And I can't help, and I said this somewhere yesterday, it's such an example of quantum entanglement that the intimacy and the energy field that we're creating is not just here. And it's not just about the feminine dimensions and exploring that and women change makers. It's a bigger conversation. It's a bigger field. And I just, am am in gratitude for all of you to come and share this conversation, and Tom for continuing to ask me to play with you. I always appreciate that.
Well, thank you all for a very rich and beautiful conversation. I'll invite the three of you and our audience to join us in the after chat. There's a link in the chat. You can go directly to the after chat. And thank you for a beautiful day. And Shawne, I'll look forward to being with you again tomorrow as we continue this conversation for our week on conscious leadership in the divine feminine. So thank you all for being with us today.
Wait.
Shawne?
I do want to remind our panelists and that Friday, we're inviting all the panelists to come together for, more or less I'm going to call it a closing conversation. It's not structured out or anything like that, but Caroline and Yoreen, if you can come again on Friday, that would be awesome. We'll have everybody else here. Well, almost everybody else, I hope, here as well.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder, Shawne, and look forward to seeing everyone again tomorrow. Thank you.
Bye-bye.